I was supposed to marry Derek Winters on a Saturday in June. Sunny skies, white lilies, and the orchestral swell of a string quartet we couldn't afford but booked anyway. He was brilliant, handsome, the rising star of our med school class, with a surgical instinct that our professors admired and a charisma that made him unforgettable. We were the couple everyone envied, until he stood me up at the altar. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't show. I remember staring at my bouquet like it had the answers. I remember the whispers. The way my mother's lip quivered as she tried to explain to the guests that something had happened, that Derek must have been in an accident. That's what we all assumed, until one of our classmates, Jenna, showed me a photo. It was posted on Instagram an hour earlier. Derek, shirtless, on a yacht in Capri, holding hands with Dr. Sloan, one of our surgical residents, 10 years older, married, and now evidently quite available. The photo was captioned, "Nothing like an Italian honeymoon. #no regrets." That's when I knew. He didn't just leave me, he planned it. He never intended to marry me. And worse, he used me to build his reputation. Our joint projects, our research publications, our interviews for top residency programs. He used me as a springboard, and then discarded me when I'd served my purpose. I disappeared after that, changed cities, took a residency in a mid-tier hospital in upstate New York where no one knew my name. I didn't want pity, I wanted silence. I stopped going by Lena Winters and started introducing myself as Dr. Elena Hale. I earned every title, every sleepless night, every "Dr. Hale, can you scrub in?" Every grateful look from a patient I helped save. I didn't date. I didn't need to. Revenge wasn't on my mind. Not at first. But it had a way of finding me. 10 years passed. 10 long, blood-soaked, bone-tired years of 30-hour shifts, never-ending rounds, and hands that shook the first time I held a scalpel, but later became unshakable. I had no idea Derek had moved back to New York. I had no idea his career had taken a nosedive, that after bouncing around between hospitals and one too many patient complaints, he was now fighting to keep his medical license. Not until my assistant, Marcia, walked into my office holding a thick manila file. "He's scheduled to observe 3 of your procedures next week," she said, dropping the file on my desk. "Who?" "Dr. Winters," she replied. "Part of a board-ordered observation to maintain his surgical credentials. He needs a clean report from a senior attending to stay in good standing." My heart stopped. "No, that has to be a mistake." Marcia, ever composed, raised an eyebrow. "You want me to cancel it?" I stared at the file. Felt radioactive. Derek Winters, the man who humiliated me in front of hundreds, who left me a public joke and never once apologized. Now he needed me. I opened the folder. There he was, still arrogant in his profile photo, still with that sharp jaw and smug smirk, but older, tired, less certain. The notes from the board weren't flattering. Missed documentation, a botched gallbladder removal, internal complaints about erratic behavior. He was circling the drain. And now I held the plug. "No," I said, voice cold. "Keep it on the schedule." Marcia hesitated. "You sure?" I didn't answer. But inside, something quiet and long-buried started to stir. Derek walked into my or like he owned it. Late, of course. No scrubs. Just a too expensive suit and a crooked smile that hadn't aged well. "Dr. Hale," he said, extending his hand. "Been a long time." I didn't take it. "You're not scrubbed in. You're an observer. Stay in the designated zone and don't interrupt." He blinked, lips twitching like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or apologize. He did neither. The surgery went flawlessly. Laparoscopic liver resection, clean cuts, minimal bleeding. Textbook perfection. My resident Julia whispered afterward. I've never seen anything that smooth. But Derek didn't comment. He just stood there, arms folded, watching me like he was trying to solve a riddle. Over the next 2 days, he followed me through 2 more procedures. He was quieter than I remembered. Less arrogant. Or desperate. I started noticing things. How his hands shook slightly when he held a coffee. How he stared too long at X-rays, like he didn't trust his judgment anymore. He was unraveling. And part of me, an ugly, petty part, enjoyed it. On the 3rd night, I found a note slipped under my office door. Dinner. Just to talk. You pick the place. D. I crumpled it and threw it away. But I showed up anyway. Not because I wanted to see him, but because I wanted answers. He picked a quiet Italian bistro. Cheap, unassuming, tucked into a side street. The same kind of place we used to dream of opening someday. He looked older in the low light. Less like a god, more like a man. I know I owe you a lot more than dinner, he said, not even opening the menu. No kidding. I messed up. Back then I thought I was invincible. Sloane offered me the world. Took it. Hurt you. I know I can't fix that. I said nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he added. But I need your signature. If I don't get it, I'm out. No more surgeries. No more practice. So now you need me, I said. He met my eyes. I've always needed you. I just didn't realize it until I lost everything. And for a second I saw the man I used to love. Vulnerable. Human. Regretful. But I didn't soften. I'd spent 10 years rebuilding my name. He'd spent 10 ruining his. The final surgery was scheduled for Friday. A complex abdominal reconstruction following a trauma case. High risk, high pressure. The kind of procedure Derek used to thrive in. He shadowed every step of the prep, asking insightful questions. I almost forgot how sharp he once was. Almost. After we scrubbed out, he followed me into the lounge. I know I'm not the man I used to be, he said quietly. But I'm trying. And if you see even a sliver of the surgeon I was, please put that in your report. It's all I have left. I studied him. Then I said, do you remember the bet we made in med school? He looked confused. You bet I'd never get a solo surgery before you. A slow smile broke across his face. And I was wrong. I stepped closer. Well, let's make another one, I said. If you can get through a week without a single misstep, no late arrivals, no forgotten forms, no cutting corners, I'll sign the form. And if I mess up, then I write the truth. That you're unstable, unpredictable, and unsafe. His smile faded. But you're going to be fair, he asked. I'm going to be honest, I replied. And with that I walked out, leaving him with his past, and a week to prove he still had a future. He showed up the next morning 5 minutes early. Not just on time early. He wore his scrubs neatly, his badge properly clipped, his notepad in hand. I didn't acknowledge him. I simply nodded once, then handed him the day's surgical schedule. 3 procedures. 1 pediatric, delicate, and 2 reconstructive. He followed me closely but not intrusively. He asked relevant questions but waited for quiet moments. I watched him watch me, and in some strange way, I saw a version of the man I used to love. Just quieter, humbled, sharper in ways pain sometimes makes a person sharper. He didn't flinch during the pediatric case, even when the mother broke down sobbing in the pre-op area. He stayed steady during the 12-year-old's facial repair, watched every stitch, didn't once check his phone or let his attention drift. By the end of the day, Julia, my chief resident, turned to me in private and whispered, "He's not what I expected." Neither was this. That night, I found myself sitting in my apartment, looking at the old photo strip I'd never thrown out. For pictures. Both of us grinning. 22 and invincible. It had been taken at a med school fundraiser when we were still dreaming of changing the world. Back when his laugh felt like safety and his touch felt like the future. I should have thrown it away years ago. But something about holding it in my hand now, after watching him spend the day trying to earn something for once, it made me hesitate. The next few days he didn't falter. He arrived early, took notes, even helped a first-year resident understand a vascular complication we encountered on Wednesday. I wasn't ready to admit it out loud, but he was proving me wrong, one step at a time. Until Thursday. We were 2 hours into a breast reconstruction surgery, using a complex deep flap technique. My concentration was absolute, and my hands moved with precision. Derek was just behind me watching on the monitor, and then I saw him flinch. It was slight, barely noticeable, but I caught it. His right hand trembled. It happened again 20 minutes later. More distinct this time, like a small tremor passing through his fingers as he reached for a coffee mug. After the case, I cornered him near the locker room. "Your hand," I said. Tensed. "What about it?" "You're shaking. That's not stress. It's something else." He didn't answer at first. Then, he exhaled through his nose and turned toward me, shoulders hunched as if he were bracing for something heavy. "I was in a motorcycle accident 2 years ago," he said. "Didn't report it. I wasn't riding, I was on the back. Someone else was driving. We wiped out. I broke my wrist and forearm. Rehab took a year." My chest tightened. "You've been operating since then?" "Not directly. Mostly assisting. But sometimes, yeah. The tremor isn't constant. Only flares up when I'm overtired." "You lied to the board." He shook his head. "No, I didn't lie. I omitted. They didn't ask about accidents. Because they assume surgeons disclose anything that could risk a patient's life." He looked away. "I didn't think it would affect my work." "You didn't think," I snapped. "You just acted. Like always." His jaw tightened. "I'm not that person anymore." I stared at him. "You still need my signature," I said finally. He nodded. "You expect me to endorse someone who hides a hand tremor?" "No," he said, voice low. "I expect you to do what you think is right." I left him standing there. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the 12-year-old's face. About how that boy would never know how close he was to being operated on by someone who couldn't keep his hands still. I thought about the old Derek. Brilliant, ruthless, self-serving. I thought about the current Derek. Ashamed, quieter, still capable of betraying trust without even realizing it. But I also remembered what it meant to lose everything. I remembered that kind of grief. The isolation. The hunger to be taken seriously again. The next morning, I filed a supplemental report to the observation board. I did not sign off on Derek's full reinstatement. Instead, I wrote, "Candidate has demonstrated significant surgical knowledge and improvement in professional behavior. However, during the observational period, a physical tremor was noted, likely linked to past trauma. Recommend extended probationary period with restriction from operating until full neurologic clearance and occupational therapy are documented." The reaction came by noon. He showed up in my office, clutching a printout of the report. "You didn't fail me," he said. "No," I replied. "But I didn't protect you either." His eyes burned. "This means I can't work in surgery for at least another 6 months. Correct." He sat down in the chair across from my desk like he'd been deflated. "I thought you'd destroy me," he said after a long silence. Leaned back. "I thought I would too. And why didn't you?" I considered that question. Truly considered it. "Because I didn't want to be like you," I said. "Because doing the right thing, even when it's inconvenient, is what separates us from who we were." He nodded slowly. "You're better than me," he said. "I am," I said. But you still have a chance to catch up. We didn't talk for a while after that. The board accepted the recommendation. Derek was placed under a restricted license, with 6 months of observation and mandatory physical evaluations. He could return to surgery if he proved he was safe. A month later, I got a handwritten letter. It said, "You saved my life again." And this time, it wasn't with a scalpel. There was a photo enclosed. It was a picture of Derek volunteering at a clinic for underserved youth. He wasn't wearing a lab coat. Just jeans, a t-shirt, and a stethoscope around his neck. No spotlight. No cameras. Just him, kneeling beside a boy with a bandaged arm, smiling as if for once, the attention wasn't on him. That photo sat in my drawer for weeks. And then one morning I slid it into my wallet. Not to remember him, but to remember who I became in spite of him. 3 months passed before I heard from him again. This time it wasn't a letter or an apology. It was an email from the hospital's executive committee, copying me on a formal request. Derek Winters had applied to rejoin the surgical rotation as an assistant under limited conditions. He had completed his therapy, passed a neuromuscular evaluation, and obtained clearance from an independent review board. They wanted my input, not as a colleague, but as the attending surgeon who had monitored his progress most closely. My cursor hovered over the reply button for almost 5 full minutes. He had done the work. It was all documented. He didn't just slide back into the system the way he used to charm his way into everything. This time it looked like he climbed. But part of me still flinched at the thought of him back in scrubs, operating again. I typed a short, clinical endorsement. No flourishes, no personal notes, just what was true. 3 weeks later I saw him again, in my OR, standing quietly beside the chief of trauma during a multi-organ repair. He didn't acknowledge me. I didn't acknowledge him. But during the surgery, he corrected a resident's instrument handling with quiet precision, then stepped back again without taking any glory. After the case, the chief pulled me aside. "He's different now," he said. "You had something to do with that?" Shrugged. "Depends who you ask." In the months that followed, I watched from a distance as Derek built something unfamiliar to both of us. Humility. He didn't seek headlines. He didn't chase the spotlight. He showed up on time, did his prep work, and left quietly when his shift ended. No networking. No grandstanding. One day, during a morning conference, a first-year resident asked him for help interpreting a surgical scan. He kneeled next to her like a teacher, not a star. He let her find the answer on her own. That was the moment I knew. The old Derek was gone. And I'd had a hand in that, yes, but only because I refused to let him manipulate the truth again. He wasn't better because I'd forgiven him. He was better because someone finally held him accountable. Still, part of me remained wary. Forgiveness isn't linear. One moment you feel healed, and the next you remember how cold the air felt in that church when he didn't show. How the organ kept playing like nothing had gone wrong. How your mother touched your hand like it might shatter. Even now, when the weather shifts, I feel that chill sometimes. Then came the surgical summit. A nationwide conference. The best of the best. I was invited to present a breakthrough case. A full facial reconstruction performed over 6 phases, integrating nerve regeneration protocols that had only been tested in Europe. The room was full. Hundreds of seats. Dozens of surgical legends. I stood at the podium, flicked through my slides, and explained every layer of the process. I talked about the patient, a young woman burned in an apartment explosion, who now smiled with full motor control for the first time in years. The audience applauded, and then I saw him, back row, alone, clapping. I thought he would approach me after, but he didn't. Instead, I found a note in my coat pocket that night. It said, "That case saved more than one person. You turned pain into skill. I learned that from you." There was no signature. Just a single paper crane folded from surgical tape. An old inside joke from our med school days. Back when we used to leave tiny origami cranes in each other's textbooks for luck before big exams. I stared at it for a long time. And then I tucked it into the inside flap of my conference folder. Not because I wanted to hold on to the past, but because even pain, when reshaped, can become something light enough to carry. I wouldn't lie and say we became friends again. We didn't get coffee. We didn't reconnect. He moved to a different city 6 months later, took a permanent position at a teaching hospital in Oregon. I heard he started a mentorship program for underperforming residents, focused on those who'd failed once or twice, but who still had the hunger to try again. Sometimes Julia would mention him in passing, like, "Winters gave a webinar last night," or, "He's doing good work out west." I'd nod but never comment. I didn't need to. He was no longer part of my present. And that, ironically, is what made me proud of him. I never needed an apology. Not really. I needed to rebuild myself. And I did. Without him, I became a top reconstructive surgeon. I taught others. I gave people new faces, new chances, new hope. I filled every space he once hollowed out. I proved to myself that I could be more than someone's almost. And if there's one lesson I carry from those years, it's this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't success. It's peace. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.